The Raptors might have their new head coach. Hey guys, Emmanuel here, and before I jump into this video, I just want to ask you guys to give me the APO special, and that is the Help a Brother Out. You can do that by hitting the subscribe button and leaving a like underneath this video. I don't really like long intros, so let's jump back into the story. On Thursday afternoon, Bleacher Report reported that the Toronto Raptors and Masai Ujiri had asked permission from the Las Vegas Aces in order to talk to and interview Becky Hammon about the potential of being the next head coach of the Toronto Raptors. And of course, this comes just a week after the Toronto Raptors fired their previous head coach, Nick Nurse, who was with them for 5 years and helped them win their first ever championship. But I'm not surprised at all. Why? Because Masai Ujiri, right after the Toronto Raptors were eliminated from the playoffs against the Chicago Bulls in the play-in tournament, he said that the Toronto Raptors had a lot of changes coming down the pipeline and to expect a lot of shifting, and in fact that everybody except for Scottie Barnes was on the table and had the potential of being moved. It was going to be a big offseason for the Toronto Raptors, and it's much needed too, because the Toronto Raptors have been mediocre, subpar for the better part of the last 3 years, right? So something needs to change. But this report was met with a lot of varying opinions from different people, especially amongst the Toronto Raptors fan base, about Becky Hammon potentially becoming the next head coach of the Toronto Raptors. Why? Well, as you all know, if Becky Hammon was to be hired to be the next head coach, she would break and make history by being the first ever female head coach to coach in the NBA. It would be a huge thing for the Toronto Raptors. It would be a huge thing for the NBA. And there are skeptics, and I'm going to get into the arguments that I've seen from the skeptics online of why the Toronto Raptors shouldn't hire Becky Hammon. And I'm going to give my thoughts and my opinion on what I think of what's going to happen. So the skeptics on Twitter, so people tweeting, prominent people, but then also the fan base of Toronto Raptors, in the comment section of the Toronto Raptors posts, stuff like that. What I've been seeing from the skeptics is this: they don't want Becky Hammon to be the next head coach, not particularly because that she can't coach, but because she's a woman. And I know that sounds extremely misogynistic, and it kind of is to a certain degree, right? So their argument is this: they're saying, yes, while Becky Hammon does have the skills, the knowledge to become a head coach, is it really good, or is it really the smartest idea to have her be the head coach in the NBA? Why? Because Becky Hammon, she's 5'8", she's a regular sized woman. And in order to be a head coach in the NBA, you need to be a leader of men, right? These guys look up to you to guide them, tell them what to do and whatever, right? And these guys are burly 6'3", 6'8" men with a lot of testosterone and very aggressive, right? So they are skeptical of players being able to respect or follow Becky Hammon when she tells them to do something. When she draws up a play for a certain player, when she's yelling from the sidelines, right? It's just not the same as a dude, an old guy with gray in his beard, telling them how to play the game, making the right calls, doing this and that, right? And I would be naive, and you would be naive, to not at least acknowledge part of where they're coming from, right? Could you imagine Becky Hammon next to Scottie Barnes? He's a tall, huge guy, right? He's physically more scarier than her, right? And I know Scottie Barnes wouldn't be misogynistic towards Becky Hammon, but I'm just trying to paint the picture, right? And I don't agree with these skeptics. I don't think that's fair, right? Why? Because Becky Hammon has a long history of being acquainted with the game of basketball. She has a vast knowledge of the game of basketball. She played in the WNBA, and then she coached under the one and only Greg Popovich. She was an assistant head coach to Greg Popovich. She was an assistant head coach to another team in the NBA. I don't remember exactly what team it was. Right before she got the job as the head coach of the Las Vegas Aces. So she's been around the game, she's played the game, she's been around people who know the game, she knows the right calls, what to do. Now, where I do agree with some of the skeptics is the job with the Toronto Raptors is to develop young men, right? That's the head coaching job, because Scottie Barnes still young, they still have some young pieces. It's to develop these guys to the point where they can become a powerhouse, a actual team that's respectable. It's not what Nick Nurse inherited when he first got the head coaching job, which was, oh, I just coached for 1 year and then I got Kawhi Leonard. let's go to the finals, right? It's not that. You have to nurture these guys. And that's where I'm kind of understanding, right? Because who is the only person that can teach a man how to be a man? A man, right? And I know that sounds misogynistic, but I do see this both sides of the argument, right? One being it's very misogynistic, it shouldn't, right? And then one being you kind of need a person who's going to be able to lead these boys to becoming men, to nurture them to become the players they're going to be. But my opinion on this, regardless of those arguments, is this. I wouldn't be disappointed if Becky Hammon were to get hired as the next head coach. Why? Because I'm a big proponent of hiring people that are competent at what they do. I'm a huge supporter of a meritocracy, and that is basically judging people or hiring them by the content of their character or their merit. I don't like identity politics, and not hiring Becky Hammon because she's a woman would be identity politics. Why? Because I don't like when companies or when people hire people because they're a woman, they're black, they're this religion, they're this. Token hires, right? People to fill quotas. I don't like that. Why? Because it impedes the quality of the job that they're supposed to do. It wouldn't make sense to hire a blind pilot because you wanted to be more inclusive or diverse. Because his job depends on him being competent and being able to see what he's doing, right? So I'm a huge proponent of meritocracy. And from what I've seen from Becky Hammon, I've seen she has a huge track record of being around the game. She has learned from some of the greats from the game, Greg Popovich. And then also, during her tenure in San Antonio, the players there spoke highly of her during her tenure. They said she knows what she's doing. She knows exactly how to coach the game. But also, I want you to take that with a grain of salt. Why? Because if there were certain players that were in the San Antonio organization that didn't agree with how she coached or didn't think she was adequate for the job, they couldn't have actually said their opinion. Why? Because the cultural environment that we live in right now would absolutely cancel them. They would chalk up their criticism of her to just being misogynistic, even if it was valid, and they would get canceled and they would get backlash. So take that with a grain of salt. But from what I've seen around the people she's been around, right, I think she is competent enough to do the job. And then also, I think the Toronto Raptors think she's competent enough to do the job. Why? Because the Toronto Raptors can't afford to make token hires. The current state that they've been in for the last 3 years, they've been subpar, mediocre. They need someone who's going to do the job correctly. They need someone who's going to be able to take them to where they need to get. They can't afford to hire based on skin color or gender or stuff like that. That's another reason why I think she's competent enough to do the job, because from what I've seen, it checks out, and then from what they see, it checks out. So that's what's going on. But also, it's not a guarantee, it's not a lock that she is going to be the next head coach of the Toronto Raptors. Why? Because she's just one of many candidates for the job. They're just going to interview her and see if she fits the bill. There's going to be a lot more candidates in the offseason. One coach I thought would be the next head coach was Ime Udoka. I was really hoping for that because, like I said, the job needs someone who can really nurture young men to becoming the men that they were supposed to be. And I think Ime Udoka did a tremendous job with the Boston Celtics young core. I think he did that, and I was hoping he would do that for us with Scotty Barnes. But the Houston Rockets picked him up last week, and he's not on the market anymore. So there's going to be other candidates, so it's not a lock yet. But yes, those are my thoughts on the potential new head coach of the Toronto Raptors. Let me know what you think of this and what your thoughts are. You can leave that in the comments below. And if you like this kind of content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and until next time, kids.